Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again. It is a Tuesday at about 9:25. Another kind of crappy day here in Mid Coast. At least it's not raining. Yesterday was the same thing. The rest of the week it's supposed to be kind of like this, but the sun slowly came out. The sun came out for about 5 seconds yesterday, so that was cool. But again, it is what it is, and it's been chilly. It's been chilly at night. I've been having to turn the heat on every night. It's been kind of crazy. I had practice last night uh, around like 7 o'clock at my place, and I had to turn the heat on in the music space for quite a while. And then I shut it off for a while, and then towards the end of the night, I turned it on again because we were in there hanging out after we got done playing for a little bit, and it was cold, so I had to turn the heat on. And I don't think ever, I can't think that it's ever happened before where in June I'm turning the heat on. Uh, it's fucking weird, but hey, it is what it is. So today is the next installment of this wonderful collection of movies that I bought last Saturday at Opera House Video. I totally struck gold. I've watched about 3 movies. I'm about 3 movies into this massive movie haul that I got, and it's been wonderful. I've been watching. Sunday was pretty epic. I had a bunch of time free, and I was pretty tired, so I just kind of took it easy on Sunday. And Sunday night, I watched a bunch of movies. I actually watched 4 movies. One that I had started watching before. I have this funny thing, and it's just kind of this how I am. I'm like this with music too, where if I put in an album, I I have to listen to the album all the way through. I can't really, put it in for a couple of songs, or like say I want to hear one song, and then I'll eject it and put in another disc for a different band or a different song. And again, I'm dating myself too these days because I only in my car I listen to a lot of music, and mostly I listen to a lot of music in my car. That's probably what most people do, but and I listen to music on home at home through my computer, sometimes on my stereo. I listen to a lot of things on my computer when I'm checking out new bands and new music and things like that. But I have this thing that I can't really, if I put in an album, I always end up having to play it all the way through. I'm kind of a completionist that way. Same thing with a movie. I think, good movies, good albums, you know, they're meant to they're meant to be listened to all the way through. That's just kind of how I've always operated it. So I won't, if I put in an album, I won't eject it usually midway through. I'll like play it and let it play all the way through and listen to the whole album, and then I'll put in another one. I won't put in an album for like 2 songs and then jump around. I'm a firm believer that when artists put together albums, that it's with the intent of having that experience of listening to the whole concept of the album. Same thing with a movie. I don't really, I never do that. I usually, if I put in a movie that I want to see, I'll, especially if it's something I love or I like a lot, I'll watch it all the way through. And I started watching. I did a review on it last week, and it was this new movie I just got called Mardi Gras Massacre. Just an amazing, such an awesome exploitation movie. Just so awesome. And I only watched it once, and then I did the video review for Film Fanatic, and then I started watching it again late Saturday night when I came home, and I watched it till about, I don't know, maybe 40 minutes or so in to where I was pretty tired, and then I ended up going to bed. So then the next night, Sunday, when I had some more time, and I was pretty tired, I decided to start, and I had bought all of these other movies. I started with the end or finishing out Mardi Gras Massacre, because I just feel like, that's part of the experience, is watching the whole thing, experiencing the whole thing. And then after that, I started these other movies from the beginning, and I watched three movies from this collection, and I started a fourth one last night, which is awesome, and I'm really excited about getting to. And the thing that's super cool is every movie that I've watched so far, um, every movie I've watched so far, I haven't seen before. So it's been really cool. And most of the movies I have in this stack, and I bought all of these at the sale at Opera House Video on Saturday. There's probably two or three, I think. I'd say two or three that I've seen before. The rest I have never seen before, and I so super excited. This is the second video for this whole series. Yesterday I did a video on Don't Open the Door, which was this awesome horror exploitation slasher movie from 1974 from Texas. And I just finished a video yesterday, and I'm going to be uploading it pretty soon. And that was the first movie of the series. The second one that I'm going to be doing today is this other movie I've never seen before, and it was a total fucking trip. It's called Suffer Little Children. It's a British movie, and it came out, never heard of it, never seen it before. It came out in 1983. And it's a British movie. This movie was originally one of the movies that made the infamous Video Nasties list because of the gratuitous violence, and also because there are a lot of children actors in this movie. And there was a version of this that was released, but it was a completely censored version. And then years later, it came out as the fully uncut version. This has the uncut version. This is DVD too. Like, this is a super awesome find. Like, this movie is pretty rough. It's the whole premise and the whole story, or the way this movie was shot, is wild, because basically the movie was created by these kids in England, and that it was directed by Alan Biggs, who was technically the director. And Alan Biggs was a really big, before he got into filmmaking, he was one of the top UK music promoters. He worked with all of the big bands in England in the 60s and 70s. He worked with Cream. I believe he worked with like Led Zeppelin. He worked on promoting all of these bands, and he was a huge name. And he went through some bad divorce, and he said in this interview, there's actually a really cool interview on it. This disc actually has a really good amount of special features on here. And he was talking about how he went through a pretty bad, rough period in his life, went through divorce, and he lost a lot of money through that whole thing. And so then he wanted to get into some other kind of form of entertainment. And at the time, his wife was involved in the film industry, and his wife at the time was basically started this film school where it was basically it was set up that for kids. Basically, kids could go, middle school kids, high school kids, college kids, and it was for younger kids, younger children, to basically go and learn the ins and outs and develop skill sets for becoming filmmakers. So he had this idea after he transitioned out of becoming from being a promoter. He had this idea of, well, maybe I'll get into film and I'll direct movies. So he wanted to, and of course, the horror, this was in the 80s, so this was still, the whole horror exploitation thing was still very, very huge. This was in the early 80s. So he figured, well, maybe what I can do is I'll make a horror movie, because they're really cheap and easy to make. Which I hear a lot from a lot of filmmakers, especially during that time, was their reason to get into that genre. So it's very interesting. but his idea was, well, maybe what I'll do is I'll use this school, these kids that my wife or which became his ex-wife, I'll use them to create this movie, and we can collaborate. So he basically, got all of these kids involved that were part of this program, and he was the director, but he basically let the kids from top to bottom create this horror movie. And it's like, it's so this movie is so utterly ridiculous, and it's it's kind of messed up. It's kind of disturbing. It's pretty gory. It's definitely, and it's funny because the movies that I've seen that have made, say, like, quote unquote, the video nasties list, are, from what I gather and from what I've seen, are not all that graphic. It's really weird. Like, I feel like there were a lot of movies that weren't included in that list during that time, which was a gross period of our history where censorship was a thing. But ironically, a lot of those films I feel are not really. I've seen a lot of other horror exploitation movies that kind of were not part of that time, that I feel are way more graphic and way more brutal. So, but the movies that actually got were victims of this witch hunt, I feel, at least the ones I've seen, are they're some of them are great, but they're actually, as far as the content goes, I feel like they're kind of mild. They're not all that graphic. But this was a movie that did make that list, and it was seized, it was raided. The people who were involved with this film, the producer and the company that was going to distribute this film, their house actually got raided, and all of the copies of the film were seized. It was eventually released during that time, but it was completely cut and basically chopped in half. And then years later, after the Video Nasties thing, kind of stopped and went away, it was then released uncut. And somehow Opera House Video acquired this version. And I will say, it's pretty gory. Especially the last half of this film. It's kind of a bloodbath, and so it does, like, live up, I think, to the degree that it had around it as being a pretty gross movie. But again, it's shot by these little kids, and it's there's some things in the movie where it's so bad and so, like, just completely crazy that it really adds a lot to the movie. And it has this almost experimental art house edge to it, especially the end, like the way the film is edited and the effects that they used. It's so funny. The music for the movie is really good, and there's times where the music is so loud in the mix that it drowns out the dialogue. So there are scenes in the movie where people are talking, and it's totally drowned out by the music. And then there's times where the level of the music goes up and down, and it's like totally fucked up, and they had no idea really what they were doing. But I also feel like it actually just adds a lot to the movie in its own weird way. And and also, this movie was all shot on video. The shot on video scene is a big thing in the exploitation, where a lot of movies were made where they're intentionally shot on video, and they're incredibly cheap, with no budget, really bad effects, but that was kind of the intention. And this movie kind of predated that whole kind of thing. This came out in '83, and now there's, from that period on and into the '90s, and even now, I did a review last year on Suburban Sasquatch, which is probably, like, I kind of think it's, like, looked at as, like, the godfather of shot on video. I mean, just such a crappy and an amazing movie. It was all shot on video with, for like $5, but it's just so awesome. That's all. Apparently, like, that whole thing is a regular scene and a regular movement. But this movie kind of was shot that way many years before it became a thing. Now it's kind of a trendy thing to shoot movies on video, on like VHS, in this digital age. So it's pretty funny. But there's some great movies. I've seen some movies that are shot on video, and they're pretty awesome. So, um, and this came out in '83, and this predated that whole kind of scene or genre or subgenre by quite a few years. But this movie is an experience. Again, it's a sight to be seen. It's so bad and it's so unbelievably terrible, but then it starts working. I feel, and then I found myself like when I watched this the other night for the first time, I was like, I don't know, about maybe 40 minutes into it, I'm like, I like this, but I don't know if I can finish it because it's just so kind of terrible and so um, I don't know, so amateur, I guess. But then, and also very disorienting too. It's a very disorienting movie because of the editing and the voice. There's a lot of dubbed parts in this movie that are just so like out of place and so badly done. And the whole premise of the movie is about this little girl who lives at this school with all these other girls, and basically she becomes possessed by this by Satan or by a devil, by a demon, and she converts all of the other girls in the school to become her minions, and then they rise up and she makes them all kill all of the adults that are in charge of them. So, but about 40 minutes into it, I was like, I don't know if I can finish this. This is kind of bad. Suddenly, I found myself totally digging it, and then I was like, this is actually, in its most at its most absurd point, it started making sense to me, and I started to really enjoy it. And the ending of this film is awesome, um, totally absurd and ridiculous. But then I started really digging it, and I actually think that this movie is totally awesome. For as terrible as it is, again, a primetime example of it's so bad it's good. This this is the very definition of that. And again, it's got a combination of things to it. I think it's like it's definitely a low down and dirty, horror exploitation movie. It it is definitely if you're a fan of movies that are shot on video, it's definitely one of the first movies that took that genre or made that genre a thing. And I do like that genre quite a bit. It and I feel it's also in its own weird way because of the editing and some other things that happen in the film. It has this like real experimental edge to it, and almost like an art house kind of a thing. So it has like different elements that make it unique, and it's kind of a fascinating movie as bad as it is. Um, and as far as like I said, movies that I've seen that have actually made the video nasty list, during that period in England, the movies that were actually banned, this is definitely the one that's that I can say is definitely one that lives up to his expectations. I mean, it's pretty gory, especially the last half when they do kill all of the adults. It's pretty brutal. It's pretty brutal. It's super gory. It's super graphic. But it's super fun. It's totally deranged, but super fun. And it's very hard to take this movie seriously. But again, I feel because of how the whole thing operates, it works in its favor. So yeah, and so again, super a very obscure movie, super underground, and somehow Opera House Video acquired this. The transfer of this on DVD is actually really good. And this is a really great package. It's, you know, great. I gotta love the artwork. I mean, and there's a pretty good amount of special features on it. There's a really good interview with the director and some of the filmmakers. Um, yeah, it's great. It's a. I was super excited, and I'm very excited that this is now part of my exploitation collection. Yeah, Suffer Little Children, 1983. Definitely check this out. This is movie. It's such a piece of garbage, but it's so amazing at the same time. So thanks again. This is Jason Dean, and we will see you next time. Peace.